You're listening to the TV Obsessive channel, presented by TVObscast.com. Okay, welcome back to the TV Obsessive podcast. We're here today for episode 90. As always, my name is Cameron Crane, executive editor for TVObsessive.com, and I'm joined by Ryan Kirksey, writer and contributor for the site. How you doing today, Ryan?
I'm doing great. This has been an extremely busy television week. I'm having a hard time sort of getting my head around everything. I haven't even watched the 3 hour Saturday Night Live 50th anniversary. So
Yeah,
much stuff started and kept on going this week. Just a lot to get to.
same. Yeah, and I picked a particularly bad time to decide for some reason that I would go ahead and binge Paradise. It was like
Oh,
I was
oh,
behind.
you're in. You're
And
in.
yeah, and I thought, see, here's my frustration. I actually thought that I was behind enough that the whole season was out, and I was wrong.
Almost.
Almost, right? So I finished the last episode available, and I went ahead and like hit next on Hulu. I was like, wait, this is a different TV program. Let's go. What is this?
Mine rolls right into Only Murders in the Building when I just let it run after Paradise. It's definitely not the same show.
It was trying to show me The Veil,
Oh,
which I'm not sure exactly what that is. It kind of rings a bell, like I kind of vaguely remember when it was coming out, that sort of thing,
yeah,
but I'm not recalling what it is. I always turn autoplay off on
yeah.
my stuff. I don't like it when I don't know. I'm a weirdo. I
So
don't like
so
some of these setups too. Like I always want to go in under the name of the show and see a list of the episodes and then choose the episode.
right,
I
right.
don't want to just like hit play from the starting screen because sometimes they mess up and like show you. Like I remember seeing someone on social media who watched the last episode of Severance season one first. Oh man.
Oh, yikes. That would be abysmal. Oh man.
And I was like, well,
Uh,
you should still go back and watch the rest. It's still worth
yes.
watching.
So are you in? Are you hooked? Are you on Team Collins? Are you on Team Sinatra? What's the story to Paradise?
With Paradise, I mean, it's fun. Like it kind of reminds me of 24 a little bit, but it's almost not as smart as 24
Yeah,
was, which
yeah.
is saying something. Um, and they just certain things stood out to me. Like, what are you doing talking about billionaires? That doesn't make any
Yeah.
sense. You know, but
It's kind of an in your face, modern commentary of the billionaires are the people around the table that run everything and decide everything, right?
yeah, well, but without, no, that's too much spoiler territory to explain. But
Yeah,
like, if you think about the context, the setting of the show, it ceases to make sense that you would have billionaires, I think. But
this is this is
anyway,
this is a hard show to talk about without spoiling
yeah.
anything. So,
Anyway, I guess I'm sufficiently in. We do have in one of our news items. We go ahead and jump to that. It has been renewed for season two. I'm curious to see where it goes. Um, I I would really hesitate to say it is good. Like I'd
no,
hesitate to use that word, but I've been entertained.
yeah, no, oh, it certainly is entertaining. There's some things you have to reach and stretch for it to make any amount of sense. But I don't know. We'll see. Kind of, there's a central mystery in this show now that it's been renewed for a second season. I hope we get the answer to that mystery, and then maybe something else will go in towards the second season. But who knows at this point?
Yeah, who knows? But network action show, fine. Yeah, let's do it. I've also seen a number of people praising the Pit. You know what
Yeah.
I'm talking about on
Yep.
Max,
Yep.
which I haven't watched, but also seems like almost people are enjoying how it feels like ER and like an old school kind of show.
Yeah.
Um, so
It's
it's
like an
cool to see some of that stuff.
R-rated ER, I think is what it is.
Yeah. Um, Forgot to mention it's February 21st here. Today we are going to be talking about Severance in the latter part of the pod. We're up to season two, episode six. So um hopefully you're on board with that. Um Also, you mentioned like all the stuff that's come out recently. Um Yellow Jackets, which is coming out like the same time as Severance. I'm also writing on Yellow Jackets. At least my articles come out at the same time and at 3 a.m. Are you up to speed? Did you manage to watch the new
So
episode yet that
I've
came out today?
not seen episode three. I have consumed the first two and then all the content around the first two, including your piece on online. So my plan is to fire that up tonight. This is a my wife and I watch it together show, and
Mm,
I can't go ahead without
yeah,
her there with
yeah,
me.
yeah. Have you ever done the thing where you just kind of fudge that and lie and just watch it again with her and pretend like you haven't already watched it? You ever do that?
I will admit I have said things like, "Oh, if you fall asleep, sometimes while we're watching, I'll just pause it and we'll finish it together," and then finished it and then rewound it back to the point where we were, and
Yeah.
if I really wanted to watch it, yeah,
I don't know if it's the healthiest relationship dynamic, but sometimes you can't help it. You just watch the thing twice and you pretend the second time's the first time.
right, right,
Um, yeah, I identified in this week's Yellow Jackets, Ryan. I identified a couple of Lost references
Ooh,
and a Sopranos reference, and those are in my article. And
okay,
since I
okay.
know, I believe at least you still have not seen The Sopranos. Is that correct?
Still have not.
At one point, you told me you were going to a few months ago, but
Yeah, I did, didn't I?
didn't come up
Okay,
again.
I
So
had decided to do it, and yet I have not. But well, that may not track with me. But this has been a very, yeah, at least the first two episodes, very losty first two episodes of the season. So it sounds like we're gonna get some more of that.
yeah, but if you want to avoid this Sopranos spoiler, you can still read my article. It's clearly marked. It's at the end,
Okay,
and you can just stop. Yeah,
just hop right into that. Okay,
yeah.
I can do that. I can do that.
Because it is actually kind of a bit of a spoiler, but I thought it was kind of interesting that it seemed to me like they were making a clear allusion to The Sopranos. Beyond that, we've got White Lotus season 3 coming out, which you are writing on. Anything you want to
Yes.
say about that here?
Yeah, I mean, this show just keeps. We'll link something here that talks about how it's far and away the highest premiere for the three seasons of this show. I mean, they clearly, with Mike White and HBO behind it, have a hit on their hands here. I found this cast, again through just one episode, to be tremendous, even compared to the past two casts, which were also very good. But the dynamics amongst the small units that are in this show, as opposed to, or maybe even in addition to what should be larger dynamics when they all start interacting, I think are just going to be fascinating. Everybody on this show has got just this quirkiness and interesting background and mystery to them. It's a good start to the season. I think you've seen it, or have you watched the first episode yet?
No, you put me on the spot. I was gonna like half pretend that I had, but I
Oh, okay.
no, I didn't find time to. It was, and I don't know how I didn't find time to exactly, because there were multiple times when I thought about, oh, I should watch White Lotus.
Yeah, yeah.
Like, oh, I should watch White Lotus before Ryan submits his article. And then like, why didn't I do it? I had plenty of
Yeah.
time. Um,
It,
but I
it's
will.
it's an
I'll
interesting
I'll
show
watch it.
because at least the structure of the first episode and some of the themes throughout is very formulaic, right? It's going to start a certain way. You're going to get introduced to certain people. There's going to be something you follow along the way. Um, but even despite that, how they do it and how they make these stories intersect is just it really is fascinating. It is rising the ranks of one of my favorite shows.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great show, through the first two seasons, and I'm sure season 3 will be as well. One of the things about The White Lotus as a TV show is so much hangs on the characters. I mean, it's more than that. It's also a really interesting approach to a mystery show and all of that. But so much is about the characters, and given the cast for season 3, I can't imagine not enjoying the characters.
Yeah,
So
they're just. I mean, it's one thing to say. So the one I was least impressed by, but probably has the most still to do in the remaining eight episodes. The character I was expected to get more from, but didn't, was Walton Goggins. Like
oh
he's
really?
in a sense like the most sideline character of the first episode, but you can tell that's not going to be the case going forward. And it's like, wow, if we're going to add that to the mix, it's just going to be excellent.
Yeah, I will definitely I'll have to catch up here.
Yeah,
Maybe I'll watch it tonight. I'll catch up. Watch it on Sundays. Make it appointment viewing. It's not like there's football on or anything anymore.
that's right. That's right.
Um, yeah, so great. Other stuff that's coming up. We've got Daredevil, Born Again. I mean, I'm just riffing now. These aren't even on our list. Um, and yeah, man, we're finally getting into where we once again feel like there's too much TV to make time for. Where
I
it
know.
feels like for the past couple of years, it's been almost like I'm searching out something that's good. You
I
know?
think, and don't forget, it seems to be still flying under the radar. Same week as Daredevil is Righteous Gemstones.
Oh
We're
yeah,
like
yeah.
two weeks away from that.
Speaking of Walton Goggins, um, we also coming in May. I wanted to follow up on this. We mentioned it on the podcast a while ago. This is one of those ones that, right, like we mentioned as something on the horizon. Murderbot coming to Apple TV Plus. We got a release date May 16th. This is based on I think it might be a series of books. Apologies, I haven't read the book or books from Martha Wells, starring Alexander Skarsgård. We got that going for us. I don't know, it
Good.
just looks interesting, kind of like starring a robot who I guess does murder.
Yeah, and like has a might have a conscience or yeah, I'm trying to get the context clues here from the little bits of information that we have. But yeah, fresh off of his run as a pompous billionaire techie in Succession, we get Alexander Skarsgård as sort of a murderous robot. So yeah, I'll certainly tune in for that.
Yeah, I think it sounds really intriguing. And most, if not all, of the sci-fi that they've done on Apple TV Plus has been pretty good, at least worth watching. And from what I've seen about Murderbot, it does seem interesting. So I do
Yeah.
intend to check that out. Um, we mentioned Paradise being renewed for season two. The Last of Us going to start right after White Lotus, which is what we predicted, I believe.
Yeah, I think yeah, it's one of the worst kept secrets I think in television. But yeah, they have officially decided that April, I believe the date is April 13th. So the Sunday after the last episode of White Lotus, they'll roll right into season two of The Last of Us. Interestingly, I don't know if I'd seen this before, maybe just forgotten it. It's reducing from 9 episodes to seven this year.
Hmm.
And I think that's partly because they've also come out this week and said, we think that we're going to be able to tell this whole story in 4 seasons. Now, right now, there are only two versions of the game that exist. The whole first season was the entire first game. And so they're starting on the second game with this season. So I don't know if they're going to take that and stretch it out or, have some of these, like long time episodes where they add some filler material to the context of what happens in the game. But over apparently the next 3 seasons of this one being shorter than the first, there will be this complete arc of the second game told. That's at least that's what it looks like right now.
And that's interesting if they're stretching out the second game for three whole seasons and already
Yeah,
thinking they need 3 seasons. Um, or if they've got other ideas or what. That'll be interesting to see and how much does the show diverge from the games
exactly.
and all of
Yeah.
that. Yeah, but I
And every
recall.
and
Go
the
ahead.
criticism of the positive criticism of season one was that they did that well. They fleshed out stories and added things and added context to the universe in an extremely good way. They just need to keep that up if they're going to do a lot of it over 3 seasons to tell the story of one game.
Yeah, indeed. Um, so yeah, as I recall, when they said April, and we immediately said, okay, well, we'll start right after White Lotus ends,
Yeah.
but it's nice to have that confirmed and have a date. Also coming up at some point, and I'm not sure if there's any date on this. Did you ever watch Robot Chicken? We're gonna get
No, no,
a
never seen
20th
it.
anniversary special of Robot Chicken. You never watched it?
I know you probably would have predicted that, I guess.
I don't know. It's Adult Swim.
I, I just first unless it's Simpsons, I just have not. I don't know something. I just have not spent enough time diving into the sort of adult animation stuff.
Yeah. I mean, cards on the table. I never really got into Robot Chicken,
Yeah,
but you know, eh, reading this news, it got me thinking about 20 years ago and how different my TV viewing experience was, and how
yep,
at that point potentially I would just have Adult Swim on at night,
yeah,
and maybe Robot Chicken would come on and
Right.
maybe I would watch some of it, and maybe it was pretty funny. It's like that and Aqua Teen Hunger Force,
Hmm.
and I forget what else was in that kind of block. But anyhow, yeah, in part, my what caught my eye was just thinking, man, it's been 20 years since that was
That's, which
a,
means that,
a
that
big
kind of that
thing.
Adult Swim era was about 20, maybe even started 25 years ago, but just in its heyday, about 20 years ago.
Yeah, and of course it's continued in certain ways, but
Yeah.
what's part of what's so different is I definitely had cable and no TiVo or no DVR or anything,
Right.
and it was just like what is currently on the television. And I also remember watching a lot of poker around that time in my life.
Oh, yeah, you're right. Around the time of Chris Moneymaker, there was every single poker tournament regional event you could find was on TV, and that was a lot of a lot of just what you just spent killing your time with.
Yeah, it was just like poker on ESPN all the time, with the innovation of being able to see their cards from under the table. That was the big thing, before you could see their cards under the table, it was like really boring to watch poker on TV. You shouldn't know
Yeah,
what cards anyone had until the end of the hand. Um, but yeah, so for those who are interested, again, our starting point was Robot Chicken 20th anniversary coming up at some point this year, and you can keep an eye out for that. Um, so I guess it's about time to talk about Severance.
yeah.
Um,
One last thing I wanted to mention before
oh,
we get
jury
to
duty.
that is just interestingly, Jury Duty, which we've written about on the site and talked about here before, is coming back for a second season. This is, as many people know, sort of maybe one of these reality slash, hidden camera shows, where someone is plugged into a situation. They're the only one that doesn't know exactly what's going on. This kind of blew up on when Freevee used to exist. Now it no longer does. So Amazon said, we're just going to take it because of the popularity of how this happened with James Marsden, who was the established actor, a guy named Ronald Gladden, who was the unwitting character in all of this. And they're going to have a second season set in some kind of corporate retreat. I don't know if it's going to be an Ortbo or not, but it's going to be some kind of corporate retreat setting where they film the next season of Jury Duty. I don't know if it's going to be called Jury Duty, but there you go.
Yeah, jury duty too, not jury duty.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, that's interesting. Sorry, I almost missed that in our rundown here. I'm getting excited about Severance, but yeah, people should check out the article that Ryan wrote on the first season of Jury Duty. Um, it's good stuff and cool that they're going to make more. Probably makes sense that they're changing the setting. Well, one of the questions though is how do you trick people again?
Exactly.
You know,
Exactly. I mean, I
um,
guess you can convince a lot of people that you're going to make documentaries about lots of things, and they'll just be, they'll just go with it.
yeah, yeah, and even if you did it in the jury setting again, you could probably find someone who didn't know
Yeah,
anything about the first season of the show. It's
yeah, yeah.
but that's always something of a challenge. I always wondered how like it just put me in mind of thinking about back in the day watching Dolly G show and was like, how do people keep falling for this? Like that sort of thing. But okay, now we will segue and talk about Severance. We're up to season 2, episode 6. Title is Attila. So spoilers will be on the table here for everything in Severance through this episode. On the other side of a brief musical interlude, will pop in here, and we'll be back in about 10 seconds.
Okay, we're back to talk about Severance Season 2, Episode 6, titled Attila. This episode is written by Aaron Wagner and directed by Uda Breschowitz. Dylan tells Mark and Helly about discovering Irv's directions to the exports hall, but the plan to go get them is interrupted when Mark starts flashing back and forth between his innie and his outie. After giving control of the floor to Miss Wong, Mr. Milchek gets some reps in on placing paper clips the right way, and then aggressively starts practicing using shorter words. In a private moment, Mark confesses to Helly that he and Helena had sex at the Ortbo. After some initial shock, Helly decides that she wants some of her own memories like that, and she and Mark sleep together in an empty office. Gretchen visits Dylan again. She appears to be falling for this version of Dylan. The two share a very intimate moment. Then she lies to outie Dylan, telling him that the visit was canceled. Irv goes to dinner at Burton Field's house, but at the same time, Mr. Drummond is going through Irv's things at his house and finds a list of Lumen employees. While at dinner, Irv learns more about why Bert got severed, but's giving a confusing timeline of his employment history with Lumen by his husband Fields. When Dr. Ragabi tells Mark that they should accelerate the reintegration process despite some risks, Mark angrily leaves to go eat, but at the restaurant, Helena confronts him, but in a friendly and flirtatious way. This causes Mark to want to follow Ragabi's plans to speed up. They perform the procedure in his basement, but Mark passes out as Devin arrives at his house. Pretty chaotic day at Lumen with all this going on. Some jumping back and forth with Mark, a little bit of everybody, and it's sort of a half and half between Innie and Outie in this episode. What sort of stood out most to you as you watch this one?
I mean, it really stood out to me how there's a definite kind of theme in the episode of romance slash is this a throuple
Yeah,
slash is it cheating on
yeah,
your husband if you make out with your husband's innie,
yes.
all that kind of stuff, right?
We've
It
got some
definitely seemed like a through line where like everything was around those kinds of dynamics.
yeah, I like sort of the subversive questions it raised about the morality of severance as regards to relationships, as regards to religion, as regards to lots of things in this episode. But you're right, sort of relationships or the intimacy between these characters really, I think, stands out in this one.
Yeah, because you've got then the Burton Irving dinner is a central scene. We'll talk about more details more here,
Yeah.
but there's that, and then Dylan and Gretchen and how we read that, and then there's Mark the innie and Helly the innie and Mark the outie and Helena the outie and that scene, which is entertaining. Um, so lots of stuff like that. We were talking about the official podcast with Ben Stiller and Adam Scott a bit before we started recording. And one thing that stood out to me in talking about this episode, Ben Stiller kept saying stuff about thinking about, what permeates was the phrase he kept using, like between innie and outie.
Hmm.
Um, Interesting language. I do think that that is, I mean, it's always been a question of the show. Again, how do you think about the innie versus the outie? Are they fully separate and distinct persons? You know, in some sense, yes. I
Yeah.
mean, you could definitely make the argument, yes, and I have done so. Um, but in another sense, well, they're sharing the same body, same brain.
Yeah.
Um, so in my mind, it has always been a big question of narratively, where will they take that? And there
Yeah.
are some possibilities that would bother me and others that would bother me less. But maybe it'll be largely left open. It just stood out
Yeah.
to me.
I just liked watching that dynamic in this episode. Maybe even though we're supposed to, I think, get more connected and more emotional about Helly and Mark, I really enjoyed watching it in the Gretchen and Dylan circumstance because it's
Mhm.
almost like you can think of it as Gretchen is maybe falling for the version of Dylan that maybe was so smitten and fascinated with her at the beginning of their relationship. And now he's this, discontented, little bit, um,
That scene actually made me
no,
really sad.
yeah, yeah, it really did. It
Yeah.
really
Okay.
did. Sort of like I'm like she's missing that, or that's the way it used to be, and then so much so that she feels a certain way, I guess, guilt about it that she doesn't even tell him that she visited him.
Yeah. So to answer my question, she feels like she cheated on her husband
Yeah,
with her husband.
yeah,
But but it also made me sad for Dylan. It made me sad for Audi Dylan,
yeah,
even if we haven't spent a whole lot of time with Audi Dylan. Insofar as it's easy enough to kind of put things together and get how Audi Dylan has struggled to, find a calling, find
Mhm.
something he's into, and that's what led him to get severed
Yep.
because he just needs to hold down a job, you know. And you could imagine if he'd gotten the job at the door factory, eventually things would have gone, he would have gotten
Yeah.
disgruntled or like stupid. We're making doors. Why are you taking
Yeah.
this so
Right.
seriously? You get enough of his personality, and I can relate to that. Then he's got 3 kids, and of course he loves his kids, but it's just like I'm led to feel like Audi Dillon is just kind of caught up in and almost overwhelmed by life and its stresses in a way. Um, and so he wants to do things like go buy a new car because that would be exciting,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? Whereas as any, I don't know, just gets to be like free from that. But I don't
Yeah.
know. Yeah, the whole thing made me a bit sad.
And even just, I think this was verbally communicated that any Dylan says, if you find something like I've found something that I'm good at down here, right? He knows he's got value and worth down there. It doesn't seem like the Audi feels that even a little bit.
Yeah, and of course we can recall Dylan's always been the one who gets excited about the prizes and the perks and the waffle
Exactly.
party, but just the fact that he won the waffle party,
Right. Right.
Um, let's jump around a little bit. We started talking about this question of the relationship between the innies and the outies,
Hmm.
and there are a few things I want to talk about with the dinner at Bert's house. But what do you think about the religion aspect of this? I mean, I was kind of surprised, but
Yeah.
then it made me think in a couple of directions. That Bert and Fields say that like Bert got severed because they went to church, to Lutheran church, for what it's worth.
Yeah.
I don't know how relevant it is, but maybe worth mentioning because I did think from a religious point of view, the claim that the innie is a separate, distinct soul, kind of weird. Wouldn't have expected that.
I absolutely would not have expected that. I found the justification for it from Fields and from Bert. I mean, just fascinating to say that. I mean, what I felt like was implied was Bert says I was a scoundrel, so I did a bunch of bad things early in my life,
Uh-huh.
but then I got severed because they heard that the church, the Lutheran church, believes that any side of you is a separate soul and therefore can be saved or brought to heaven to be with God because of because of that separation. However, that they did not get at church, and this is someone who is religious. This is always one of my biggest hangups is that they did not get at church that you know there is something called forgiveness and grace, and there are things that you can do your outie self to earn that as well, right? And that they have to go through that procedure in order to accomplish what they're hoping they'll get in their eternal life or whatever.
Yeah, but let's follow that out because you're absolutely right, and I don't know that much about Lutheran doctrine in particular here, um, as opposed to Catholicism or what have you.
Hmm.
I don't know if you might know more than I do, but yeah, definitely. I mean, it's this like the central idea of Christianity in terms of seeking forgiveness, salvation, and so on, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Um, so is there, I mean, I know that there are some notions, at least in like Catholicism, of what is it, the cardinal sin that's unforgivable or something like
Hmm.
this,
Hmm. The
uh
turning your back and turning your back on God, that's the unforgivable sin.
so okay. One possibility is that Bert has committed sins that are so bad that he feels he could not be redeemed. The other possibility is he's still a scoundrel and he's not going to stop being a scoundrel.
Yeah,
And I prefer the latter, right? Because
yeah,
they're saying rather than Audi Bert, you know, um, showing that contrition and seeking, absolution and all of that.
yeah.
No, Audibert is going to keep being a bastard. So the only way he could possibly get into heaven is to like pick up on this loophole, whereas any could get in. And
Yeah.
like, Fields is on board with that.
And I can't help but think, I know we're going to get into this, that idea of the horrible things he has done must in somehow tie into this idea of how long was he or has he been at Lumen and what is he doing or what has he done, right? This idea
Yeah.
of the sort of fuzzy timeline, because yeah, one of the what little I do know about Lutheranism is you are saved by faith alone, not by deeds or things you do or things you try
Hmm.
to fix, but your faith and your belief save you. And so it's not like that. He's like, okay, well, the innie can go and do a whole bunch of good stuff, and therefore he'll be saved. The Audi can make that turn and that pivot if they want to. There must be something that's keeping him from doing that, is what I think you're saying as well.
Yeah, so let's go ahead and go there, right? That it it's interesting because I'm tempted to say Fields lets it slip, but he doesn't so much let it slip as make a point of bringing it up, right? Because they're telling the story of why they started calling each other Attila.
Yeah.
They don't really say why, just that it's like a, you know, metonymy is the word, right? It's a metonymic move from Hun, right? Because
Yeah.
Attila the Hun. So they called each other Hun. Now they started calling each other Attila. Okay, I don't have any more to read into that, but it opens up the space where Bert says they started doing it about 10 years ago, and Fields makes a point of saying, oh no, it was 20 years ago, because I distinctly remember 20 years ago having drinks with you and your
Yeah.
partner at Lumen.
Partner at Lumen. Yeah. Yeah. A lot of details for it being wrong, or he gets, well, I forget what he says at the end. He gets fuzzy or he forgets things sometimes. A lot of details there.
And then, like Bert, doth protest too much, as it were, in terms of trying to say, um, apologies for Fields. He gets confused. He brings it up again as
Yeah.
Irving is leaving. Because apparently, as Irving knows, severance has only existed as a procedure for 12 years, or at least that's the official story.
Yeah.
But I'm not questioning that part so much. I rather tend to think that Bert worked at Lumen as an unsevered employee.
Yeah.
Maybe he's in a fairly high position, and that's part of where he's done the bad, nasty things that will make him never go to heaven. And then the church story is true,
Yeah.
and he decided to become severed. Um, at that point, which also raises the question of whether Bert still works for Lumen. What do you think?
I am of the opinion. So we need an explanation for why Bert has been following Irv around in the car,
Mm-hmm.
watching him, make these phone calls at the payphone. Is it just because he showed up and wants to know what's going on, or is it because he sort of has more of a mission or intention of following him around? So he's just curious, or he's got a job to sort of figure out what's happening here. And now that we sort of have heard these things, and we've always been confused about, did Irv also have these experiences at Lumen, right? He knows about the exports hall. He has these visions. He's seen things before. Yeah, I'm now more in the camp of they both used to work there, perhaps together. Um, Fields knew this guy. Why else would Fields be comfortable with him coming over? But does Bert still work there? I'm not sure. Have a thought on that one yet.
The perhaps together is tricky because the only way, I mean, I believe that they don't really know each other now. So the only way that I could buy that they previously worked together as unsevered workers is with a further wrinkle to the brain stuff Lumen can do to you,
Yeah, they
which
could.
is possible. Which is
If
possible.
Irv worked there before, it's they have wiped his memory enough to where he doesn't remember that time in his life and just has flashes of this hallway.
Yeah, I mean, maybe. Personally, I think, unfortunately, right? Like, because I would love it if the story was just that Bert was following Irving because he's curious and, has this quirk, wanting to know why the guy showed up at the store. But I find myself feeling pretty confident that Bert still works for Lumen and has been keeping an eye on Irving and further invited Irving to dinner so that Drummond could go into Irving's house and poke around.
It does create a convenient opportunity for him to get in there, to know that he's got a couple hours to go searching through things. And I mean, do we see him looking at anything more, or looking for anything more than just that directory of employees that he has? I'm not sure exactly all he's looking for, but they certainly focus on that for quite a bit of time.
I don't know if I think Drummond was looking for anything in particular,
Yeah.
but if you think about him finding that, I mean, we've seen this before. It's in and of itself, I think, worrisome from Lumen's point of view that you would have Irving compiling a list of severed employees and so on
Yeah.
and so forth.
Yeah.
Now my sort of big theory, which I mentioned seeds of on the podcast last week, and I talked about this more in my article on this week's episode. People want to check that out at TVObscast.com, because the starting point was this Trotsky stuff, right?
Yeah.
The show made me start thinking about Trotsky, but that has led me in the direction of thinking that with Irving at some point, he was pretty high up in the company,
Hmm.
and maybe Irving becoming severed was not his choice.
Yeah, and that idea we're talking about with Ben Stiller of what permeates sort of the commitment and devotion to Kier and Lumen permeated because, in the first season, at least until what happens with Bert, where he's sent away, he is the most devoted employee it seems that they have.
Yeah, so like, remember when Miss Cobell was gonna go in to Lumen and then got spooked and ran away?
Hmm.
Maybe it's because she like knows what they did to Irving and was
Yeah,
afraid they were just about to do that to her,
yeah, yeah.
right? Something like that.
Which, speaking of, four episodes out of six now with no Miss Cobell, so I remain curious how they're planning to integrate her into the plot, if at all, over these last four.
Yeah, I mean, I would assume she would come back into the story in some way. Narratively, it
Yeah.
makes sense for her to be absent, um, because she got fired and
Yeah,
ran away.
yeah,
But where is she? What is she doing? I'll be curious to see whether they check in with her in Salt's Neck or wherever she ended up going,
right.
or if the next time we see her is when she returns, um, to Kier, the town's named Kier.
Town is named Kier. I'm curious, for lack of a better term, whose quote unquote side she's going to be on when she returns, right? She's clearly spooked and has not gotten what she wanted out of Lumen. Does she care more about now the severed employees that she was responsible for on the floor? So just sort of curious what her role will be if and when she does come back.
Right. I mean, I would tend to imagine something in the direction of staging a coup, but could it be successful? Is Milchek getting disgruntled enough that he's also going to turn against Lumen? But
Yeah.
to be clear, like, look, this is part of, not to keep talking about Leon Trotsky too much, but part of why that reference is sticking for me is it was precisely
Yeah.
after Lenin died that Trotsky was the threat to Stalin. And Stalin won the power struggle and was like, we got to get rid of Trotsky,
Yeah.
right? Exile them, and then ultimately had him assassinated even in exile, you know?
Yeah.
And it makes me worried about Irving if that parallel is something the creators have in mind, because the implication would be, well, exiling Irving's not enough, firing Irving's not enough, you got to go kill him.
Yeah. I do worry about that. I worry about that as well. I worry about, if I'm power ranking the fates of people I'm worried about, I mean, Irving is certainly at the top of that list because of the fact that he is what he has done, what he knows, what he might have been, who he might have been in the past. Yeah, I'm concerned about Irv.
On the flip side of that, too, who is he calling on the payphone? We've got a couple possibilities, I guess. The whole Mind Collective, kind of doubt it. They do seem just like,
Yeah,
wackos, whatever. Ragabi, or someone associated with Ragabi,
yeah,
right? She's not associated with the whole Mind Collective, from what she said, at least.
yeah.
Other possibilities. I'll mention briefly. I was revisiting the Lexington letter, which came out, what, after season one or in the middle of season
Mhm.
one? I don't remember exactly. And I don't know that there's a whole lot there to read into. But one thing that probably is worth working in is how in that letter, Peggy has this theory that somehow the data she was refining caused a truck to blow up, which
Yeah,
is
yeah,
like a truck of a competitor of Lumen.
yeah.
Was it Dorner or something like
Hmm.
that?
I think so.
And I don't know what I make of that in general. I don't want to get too hung up on it right now, but just to mention, like, all right, well, maybe another possibility is that Herb is calling them or something like this, or I don't know. I don't know what the other possibilities are. I presume we will find out.
I presume we will too. I don't want to also rule out that he could be in communication with Cobell, that Cobell is somehow communicating with him on what's happening there. We'll again, I don't know. Just all options are on the table, I think.
Yeah, I mean that's possible. And then last option, yeah, would be someone we've never met before. There's also a possibility. All right, good. So we've talked about that quite a bit, but I think that that is a big,
Yeah.
part of this episode. We still need to talk a bit more about the Mark and Helly stuff, I think,
Yes.
and
And the the Ragabi
yeah, the
brain surgery in the
reintegration.
basement part of the episode. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you just kind of made me jump there. What do you think of the fact that it's kind of like all of a sudden Ragabi wants to go fast? She's been wanting to go real slow to him. God, take it easy. Keep
Yeah.
drinking your disgusting drink, and
It's
now she
almost like
wants to go fast.
she saw some signs of success with Mark, some signs that things were happening the way they should, and she wants to, put him in the advanced course all of a sudden. It just you're right. It's contrary to what she said at the beginning and may result in what we see here happen at the end of the episode.
Yeah. The best I've got is thinking about Mark losing time
Yeah,
because that is disturbing. I mean, it's disturbing from a personal point of view if you lose
yeah,
time like that. But also, we don't know exactly how that workday ended, if you think about it, right? We cut
exactly.
from Miss Wong attending to Mark, and then he starts flashing, and then all of a sudden he's in the basement. So, besides the fact that it freaks Mark out, maybe we need to think about how Ragabi does have the concern of them being found out and that
Yeah,
undermining things. And
and
so
and,
if
and
Mark's starting to go, nutty at work and losing time and stuff like that, there's a practical level concern to that as well.
yeah, and I found it interesting. It seemed like at the end of last episode, episode 5, Mark was jumping back and forth between place, right? His presence was in the basement, then in the office, and then back and forth. Now, as we've clearly seen, he's jumping back and forth in between time, it seems like, or losing that time. And so, yeah, just completely be disassociated and have nothing in between there. So it just seems like I think regardless of something at the very beginning about, oh, soon we'll see things start to smooth out or even out or start to work the way that it should. And so maybe that's just a sense of sometimes you're going to feel like you're one place where you're really another. Sometimes you're going to flash to where the other side of you is and you can't account for that time. It just doesn't seem like, again, all we have is PD to go by, but it doesn't seem like this is working the way that it's supposed to.
Yeah, and PD's not the best, most hopeful example here
Yeah.
of reintegration.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, just to follow up on what I was saying, like if Mark said Ragabi or something to Miss
Yeah.
Wong, well, that could be a problem.
Yeah.
Um, but speaking of PD, who died, um, do you think that Ragabi's done this with anyone else? At one point, Mark says you've only
Hmm.
done this one time before, and she doesn't push back, but she has claimed that she's gotten better at it and so on. I don't know. Any thoughts on that?
That's a good question. We don't know if there's any other surrounding Lumen offices nearby that she could be working with people, but we don't know of anyone that she could have been practicing on, I guess.
Well, there's Dario, there's Gwendolyn, there's Mark
That's
W.
true. Yeah. That's true. That's true.
I mean, but there are also any number of people in that specific Lumen office, right?
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
met the whole mammalians do turbo department. There were a lot of them,
Yeah. Yeah.
and there were a significant number of people in O and D. And then I don't know if there are other departments. I feel like there was some number might have been mentioned in season one that I believe was bigger than three, but
Yeah,
we've only encountered those three, you know.
yeah.
But certainly there are people around where it would be possible. Um, I find myself doubting it though, because, you know, I don't know. Where would it fit in time wise between
Yeah,
Petey and Mark? How would you
right.
not be seeing, like, why wouldn't Ragavi still be more concerned about keeping tabs on anyone else she's done this with, where she
Exactly.
seems content to just live in Mark's basement?
Yeah, she's living with Mark, and you're right. I mean, we sometimes get lost in the concept of time here. Between Petey dying and where we are now, it's not a long period of time. Maybe a couple of weeks,
Yeah,
three
let's say a
weeks.
couple
It's
few weeks.
not a long period of time for her to go experimenting on this with other people.
Yeah, yeah. I don't know if we can pin it down, but it feels like it's just been a few weeks. Um, I've had some other thoughts this week about time, but we'll save that for later. We already talked about it before a bit. We were talking about the car models and stuff like this, and you floated the theory, but some other stuff has been percolating to me. I got in. Well, I'll go ahead and mention this. I kind of sort of got into an argument on someone's YouTube video in the comments because
Okay.
this person was trying to claim that it didn't matter. They're like,
Mm,
oh, don't worry about what year it is, or the time stuff, or the fact that
yeah,
Mark's ID says he was born in 1978. My point was simply like they could have very easily not shown us that,
yeah, yeah,
right?
exactly.
And then further, as you realize the passage of the UUR that Rickon changed, it's about the clock on the wall.
Oh, yes, yes. I
And
knew what
that's the
you're talking
same
about.
passage that Mark read in the season one finale. It's about the clock on
Mhm.
the wall. So it seems like there's a lot of indications in the show that make us, they want us to be thinking about the question. Come on. Yeah. I don't have an answer to the question.
Yeah, that is one that needs to be on the list of they should and likely will provide an answer for why and where and when.
Yeah. Talking about it more maybe doesn't fit the best with this episode. I think it was last week, or rewatching last week's. Another just little inconsistency kind of thing. When they were wrapping up Irv's
Yeah,
funeral, the clock on the wall said 1:05 or something. And then Milchick goes to his performance review. That's more than 4 hours long.
it'll include lunch if it goes more than if it goes more than four. Yeah.
And then he's back in the elevator at 5 minutes to five. Doesn't that up?
I don't know, my friend. Yeah, I don't. It's like I think you're right.
Anyway, yeah, I'm sure we'll find the opportunity to dig into that more on a future podcast. We need to talk about Mark and Helly more before we wrap up, at
Yep.
very least. Where do we even start here?
Yeah, interesting. Maybe we could save the well, let's do this. We're talking about the time with the Regavi, and so let's do Audi, Mark, and Elena, and then we'll end with any Mark and Helly. So
Yeah,
why
we've
do you
taken this
think,
episode very out of order.
yeah, very
Yeah.
out of order. So why do you think Elena approached Mark at the restaurant? What was her intention there?
Can it be two things at once?
Yeah,
Because I think she has the hots for Mark.
yep,
That's real. Um, but also, um, probably checking in on Mark's Audi from the perspective of her role at Lumen. I think probably both. I don't know. What
yeah.
do you think? Because it is sort of possible that she's there wholly unofficially and no one knows.
Yeah. I think that's very true because in one sense it was a very flirtatious conversation at times. Then in one sense almost insulting and condescending, getting his wife's name wrong. And talk about things he doesn't know or she knows that he won't know. So I don't know. I think it's more just a checkup. Let me just sort of follow and see what's happening here. She apparently doesn't know that she's doing this right at the time that he's going through these reintegration procedures with Ragabi. I don't know that she suspects something, or maybe she does. We'll have to see.
That's the thing. Maybe she does because this comes right after Mark has the incident at work with a nosebleed
Yeah,
and loses time. So that question of, well, like what happened for the rest of that workday? How weird was he? What kinds of things did he say? We don't know. We skipped with him from that scene where he's being attended to by Miss Wong
yeah.
to his basement with Ragabi. So,
And I'm sure Miss Wong brought that up the chain of, oh, this happened.
right.
I'm sure there's
So
protocols in place for that.
that's where it would make sense to me at one level if Helena is going to check on Mark, see what's up with Mark. Maybe she's even wondering if Mark will recognize her, that sort of thing.
Yeah, exactly.
Maybe.
Exactly.
It's a really good scene though.
It is a good scene. It
Is it
is a good
wrong, um, Ryan, do you think it's wrong to, as the kids say, ship Helena and Audi Mark?
Oh boy. So now we're going to get into the quadruple or whatever this thing is here. Again, they seem to always do this where just in the same episode where you're maybe starting to feel some sense of empathy for Elena, that she, even though she's an outie, doesn't have much control of her own life, of her own body, of what she does. Um, get a sense of, well, I just want some connection and some emotion. Um, then you get, Helly's version of it that, I have no control over my body. She dresses me. I want, that's her memory. I want my own. It's just sort of this, yeah, just it's hard to balance sort of who you want. I mean, I'm clearly on Team Helly, but there are moments where I'm like, well, Elena just is almost a robot herself at this point.
Yeah, I mean it's really interesting to me how they play with that and how much sympathy we have for Helena, how much sympathy we
Yeah,
can have
yeah,
for Helena. And I've certainly found it growing within myself. At the same time, this scene does kind of feel like she's just messing with Mark.
yes, yeah,
Um, and there's something vaguely threatening about it. But does Mark, I mean, Mark ultimately does experience it as threatening, but part of me feels like she means it that way. But at
yeah,
the same time, it is flirtatious. And
yeah.
there are kind of some real sparks at play. And it's a really good scene. But yeah, as you mentioned, she gets Mark's wife's name wrong. How do you read that? I'm presuming it's intentional.
Yeah, I took it as nothing but intentional. Idea that I know everything, I know all. And I don't know, it almost put Mark in his place. Like despite this tragedy that you've had, it doesn't really matter much to me to care about that at your level. Like I'm the heir to this company. You're just the severed worker for that sense of dominance. But again, it's hard to justify that with the sort of flirtatiousness of the conversation.
Right. So you could read it a slightly different way as almost, well, I don't care about you that much. I'm not like
Right.
stalking you. I memorized your file. I remember that your wife died, and that's sad. And oh, oops, sorry, I messed up her name, and it was like vaguely kind of close, to
Yeah.
say Hannah instead of Jenna, um, Gemma. I think I just said Jenna. See,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
same difference. Whatever.
Who knows?
Who knows? Yeah, but anyway, I'm curious to see where that goes. On the other side of things, um, the Mark and Helly Amy dynamic, where I mean, I appreciate that Mark felt he needed to tell Helly what had happened at the Orpo. And it's weird because I was a little bit surprised at how this played out, but it also made a lot of sense. What do you think?
Yeah. I was actually happy that this happened.
Yeah.
Happy that Helly, as at least in the hours that she has to herself, has taken over some control of her life in the last episode. And now in this one, despite sort of the shock of, oh my gosh, this is what happened and it wasn't me. comes to the sort of empowering realization that, well, I want something to make me happy too. So I'm gonna reach out and grab it and I'm gonna take it. As long as Mark is down with it, which it seems like he was because he thought it was her before, I was happy for them.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, God, it's so weird to think through the fact that Audi Helena had sex with Mark at the Ortbo, and now Innie Helly is having sex with Mark in the office, and
Yeah.
Audi Helena's flirting with Mark's Audi, who at the same time Mark is undergoing reintegration and having flashes back and forth. And in that
Yeah.
restaurant, maybe almost kind of sort of seems to feel like he knows Helena more than he should, and who knows, man. But
Yeah.
from the perspective of the innies, yeah, I'm with you that I thought it made a lot of sense, and um, it's kind of nice to have Heliar back.
Yes,
Props to
absolutely.
Britt Lauer, by the way. I mean, just to think about the felt differences between Innie Helly and Audi Helena. The fact that we clocked her basically from the beginning as
Yep.
that's Helena, that's not Helly. But the fact that now it really does feel like, oh yeah, that's Helly. That's the Innie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's no real arrogance and even not much confidence before the episode, the what happens in this episode with Heliar. She's very, um, I don't know. She's just willing to be someone who lets others take over, willing to be someone who can support whenever needed. She's not sort of this dominant, I'm a Kier, or I'm an Egan, I can do whatever I want figure. She's just complete opposites, it seems like. We see that some in Dylan, we see that some in Mark, but I think maybe most strikingly it's with Heliar.
Yeah, it's just also it's such a small difference, but also so um significant, I mean,
Yeah.
it's not like one of them has a goatee, it's not like marked like that. But you can definitely tell. And with all of them, I mean, it's a running thing with all of the actors in the show who played both NEAs and Audis that
Yeah.
they all do this great job of how coloring them with small differences, as it
Yeah.
were,
Yeah.
right?
Yep.
Helly's position, where it's like, on the one hand, she's our favorite protagonist, but on the other hand, she's the main bad guy, makes her kind of really interesting in
Yeah,
this
I
role.
love it. I love it.
Let's see. Other things we didn't really talk about Milchek. I don't know how much there is to say about Milchek. Um,
Just seeing a couple people say that one scene might be his Emmy submission reel that goes in. I mean, just to be able to act like that, staring at a mirror. I mean, it's just pretty impressive.
yeah, I mean it is great, and I'm curious though about where his overall arc is going.
Yeah.
You know, um, you know, is he really gonna stop using big words? I'd be a little bit disappointed.
I
I like
yeah,
Ben
I would.
Milchek saying things like, "You need to eradicate in yourself childish folly."
Yeah, I do wonder, is him doing this sort of doubling down on the commitment to Lumen, or is it defiantly doing what they want and having to practice just so he makes sure he gets it right, just so he can sort of play the part for a while.
Well, it's interesting in that scene how it seems like he goes from practicing using smaller words as though he's talking to Miss Wong
Hmm.
to it kind of shifting where it starts to feel like he's talking to himself
Yep,
when he's
exactly.
down to just saying grow,
Exactly.
grow, you know. Um, so definitely a good scene. I guess the thing is he doesn't really interact with anyone in this episode other than Miss Wong briefly.
Yeah, that's right.
He
And
just
very, very briefly.
spends the episode getting paper clips on the right way and talking in the mirror. Um, yeah. Anything else you want to hit on here before we wrap up?
No, just one maybe small theory. Just in trying to leave no stone unturned, I couldn't help but look up what the name of the restaurant is that he leaves after he meets with that Mark leaves after he meets with Elena. It is
Okay.
Zufu, Zufu, which is interesting in Mandarin as a reference to grandfather. And so this is
Okay.
after a conversation where Mark and Helena have talked about meeting Helena's father, and Mark has now had, let's call it, two shots on goal to try and there's some people speculating that a pregnancy storyline is coming. I don't know. Obviously, we don't have any sense of that, but I don't know if that's coming, but that would be very, very complicated in the scope of this show.
You unfortunately made me wonder, like, are they cousins? Oh no. Hopefully it's not going in that direction. There is baby stuff, people have noted in the credits and stuff like that. I don't know.
Yeah.
We'll see. I did want to mention, almost forgot here, in terms of the promotional tie-ins, this thing I sent to you right before we got on, which I think is still ongoing. There's like 8 hour music to refine to featuring Odessa. People can find this on YouTube. I checked it out very briefly. It's like Severance music, but kind of remixed. And I don't know if people are familiar with this group, Odessa, whose name apparently refers to a sunken ship. So
Yeah.
they're putting those references in the music. Edmund Fitzgerald, and I don't know. Don't have much more to say about that, but people want to check that out. I don't know if you want to watch it for 8 hours, but
Just seems to be, yeah, some electronic music with some sporadic cuts of scenes from the show. Yeah.
yeah, there are visuals, right? I did before this, Apple TV had also put out a video that was just 8 hours of the Severance score on its own.
Yeah.
Like, do
Uh,
you want to listen to that for 8 hours in the background? Do 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 do.
that would be a harrowing work day, I think.
But this is that, but then it's yeah, it's remixed. And I mean, I thought what I heard of it, saw of it, was pretty cool. But as I said to you before we got on, hard for me to imagine watching the video for 8 hours. Somewhat hard for me to imagine listening to the music for 8 hours in one
Yeah,
stretch, but
absolutely.
with that variance in there, maybe it would be worth listening to if you're into this kind of thing, if you're into that kind of electronic music as
Yeah, there
well.
there is no shortage of, let's call it, extracurricular promotional material for Severance these days. They're pumping it out pretty frequently.
Yeah, and it's pretty cool.
Yeah.
From the little Lumen promo videos to the Grand Central Station thing that they did, which there wasn't really much to consume there from
Yeah.
a distance, as it were, unless you went to Grand Central. But it's cool that they did it, and probably there'll be a little bit more before the
Yeah.
season's over. Probably there'll be more um, little videos with Miss Wong or Natalie or
Yeah. Yeah.
Milchett or that kind of thing. Um, all right, well, I think we'll leave it there. Thanks always for listening. Hopefully you enjoyed the podcast. If you did, please leave a good rating, review, all that kind of thing. If you're on YouTube, give us a thumbs up. Please subscribe to the YouTube channel. Much appreciated. Check out TVObsessive.com. You can find recaps of Severance from me each week, as well as articles on any number of other shows. Currently, I'm on Yellow Jackets as well. Ryan's on White Lotus. Um, Follow TV Obsessive on social media, search for TV Obsessive, and we'll be back next week talking about Severance.
All right. Episode 7 next week. See you then.